Hey there, we got a new update for you today. We have a materials update because we are getting closer to production and finally getting this thing actually printed. So I want to give you some insight into how board games are constructed. We've had videos before where we talk about design and the whole design process that can take years, but here I want to talk more about like the materials and the process that goes into getting a game prepared for actual industrial printing. And we've discovered a lot of things. We've been spending the last month looking over a lot of games, tearing apart our favorite games, tearing apart things we also really don't like, to discover why and how these games are built the way they are, and exactly how much of their product design we want to imitate and how much of their product design we want to innovate. So, number one, the rulebook. That is something that has been pretty much unchanged for a couple of years. The original rulebook was created by Cassandra in InDesign. It's served its purpose so far, but now the new rulebook is being redesigned by Guybrush Taylor. He's the designer of Doom Room. You should check out his game, which is not released yet, but he is awesome looking. And he is doing a total redesign of the rulebook for Sovereign. And I want to show you guys how it's looking right now. So right here we have an example of the Sovereign rulebook. The rulebook is set in black with these yellow highlights on the outsides. We never had any boundary borders, which is really important for keeping your eye associated with where it needs to go on a page. We're also doing a lot of investigation into typefaces and point sizes. This is nitty-gritty in terms of typography, but it's super important when you're trying to create a rulebook that is not just a learning material, but is also a reference material. That's something that we found when we started tearing into rulebooks from games that we own. We found a lot of games have rulebooks that are okay learning materials, but are absolutely awful reference materials. All right, so I'm going to give an example here of a game that I absolutely love. The game, don't love the rulebook. This is the Paleo rulebook. I think Paleo is one of the best games I have ever played, but this rulebook is not the best rulebook you will ever see. At first, I thought that had to do with the writing. I thought maybe it was being translated from French and wasn't entirely coherent because you have to read it a couple of times, and then I really don't want to pull the rulebook back out and reference it again when I go in to play this game. And usually I do have to reference the rulebook at least once or twice every game I've played of Paleo. The first thing you notice that makes this thing different from the Sovereign rulebook is that this is a big square rulebook. It's square, and it's the exact width and height of the box that the game comes in. And you'll see this in most Kickstarter games now, as well as I'd say maybe 60 or 70% of modern hobby board games have these big square rulebooks. I didn't even question this, and when I started typesetting our new rulebook, I got really worried that ours wasn't big and square because that meant it didn't look like other big box expensive Kickstarter games. And we started doing a deep dive into exactly what we should do and why, and whether the thing should be big and square. So, why should we not make a game with a big square rulebook? Number one, this thing is horrible to hold. If you try and pick it up and hold it and read it in the air, it is nearly impossible. And trying to turn the page while holding this thing stable is an exercise in frustration. Every second you're like fumbling around with the rulebook is another second you don't want to be learning the rules. And you certainly don't want to be picking it back up and referencing it if you need to remember a rule in the game. Part of this is because the rules are normal thickness paper, and so they end up flopping around when you hold it like this. If you place it the way it would be reasonable, like put it down on the table, it's fine if you don't have a game set up. But if the game is set up on your table, then this is now covering up components of the game or moving them around. What I found was games that I want to reference the rules to, and I want to pick up the rules, and I'm happy to just grab the rulebook, check out a rule, and put the rulebook back, are almost inevitably rulebooks that are approximately 8.5 by 11, usually exactly. This is the US standard paper size, and it's not random. It turns out it's that way for a reason. It's magazine paper size. If I hold this rulebook, here's the Sovereign rulebook. If I hold this in the air and I open it up, you can see that the edges of the rulebook actually sit right in the middle of my arm as I cradle the back of the rulebook with my fingers like this. This allows me to easily turn pages really quickly, but it also allows me to scan pages with my non-dominant hand. I can scan anything inside of the rulebook really quickly. I can also point to things in the rulebook to other people. So this is our sample print for the rulebook. Let's try and get the rulebook size and also the font points correct. And now we've got these yellow highlights. It turns out that yellow is much easier to grasp in your field of vision versus white. It's actually got a higher brightness in terms of perceptual clarity. So yellow on black, this is why a bumblebee is yellow on black. This is like why warning signs are yellow on black. It's actually way more effective than white on black. So what you want is for your highlights to be yellow. That brings your perceived clarity up and lets you easily reference important words all across a page just by glancing at the yellow motions. Next up, card quality. We've talked about card quality before, but I'm going to go into a little more detail on how manufacturers explain to us the kinds of card quality we can expect from them. And I'm going to show you some examples from 2 different manufacturers here. The first is from Panda. This is not our manufacturer, but they are really good at sending out samples, and so I want to show you some samples from Panda Manufacturing. Not appropriate for us, but they have some great samples. Here we have 3 samples from Panda Manufacturing. The first one here, we've got 290 GSM Chinese Black Core. Now this is, I would say, not great quality. The first thing you're hearing, the 290 GSM, that's a pound level. That's how much it physically weighs. That's how much like a roll of this stuff weighs in the real world. What you want is cards that are heavy. They should feel heavy, but not so heavy that they're hard to shuffle or hard to hold, right? So 290 GSM Chinese Black Core. Black Core is the core between the 2 sheets of paper on either side. So there's like a core in between that allows for that snapback, that allows you to fold a card, let go, and then it snaps back to its original structure. That's the core in the middle. Now, it's okay. It's fine. It's okay. It's an okay cardstock. And if you didn't know what you were looking for, you would probably think it was great. But it's not what I want. This is 300 GSM Blue Core. Now, it's a little heavier. Now that feels a little better before you start messing around with it, but it's blue core, which means that its snapback isn't correct. So if I take this and I start folding it and I let go of it, something about it feels more cardboardy and less cardy. I don't know how to describe that, but like there's something that feels wrong about the snap in the way that your nerves react to this card. It doesn't like it, so when you snap it onto a table, it feels cheap. When you're holding it, it's generally fine because the weight is correct, but then you snap it onto a table and it feels wrong. It feels like it's going to fold. It feels weak. Okay, so that's blue core. Again, not appropriate for a game like this where it's all cards and the cards need to be the highest possible quality. We got 310 ivory core. White core is somewhere in between. Again, now we're increasing the weight. The cards are a little bit heavier. They feel sturdy, but they just don't. If I take them all together and I like riffle through them, they just don't feel great to. That's not nice. I don't know why I don't like it exactly because ivory core is close, but it's. I don't know, something about it just doesn't feel great. So that's why we didn't go with Panda partially, is because their cards are awesome for games that aren't all cards, but they don't have certain options that we need for both our cores, our weights, and the wood that our cards need to be made out of. So this is Meija Manufacturing. This is European Black Core 305 GSM with a smooth finish. Now already, I wish I could hand this to you so you could understand what you're feeling, but just taking this out of the package, I'm like, oh, that is a completely different feeling. The weight just feels correct. It doesn't feel too heavy like the 310 felt a little bit too heavy. It doesn't feel too light like the 290 feels. The smooth finish on the outside feels perfect, like a very, very high quality playing card, like a Magic card. And the snapback is perfect. It feels effortless when I bend it, and then it snaps right back to where it came from. And if I put it on the table, it snaps perfectly. It doesn't fold. So that's our card quality. So you know that the cards are going to be really cool to hold, but also really durable, and they're going to last. Next up, let's talk echoes. So you probably know that in the Kickstarter, we reached a goal where the echoes were all going to be different images for each faction. We also released an update in an email where I talked about how I was doing story snippets, little lore drops, for every single echo in the game. That is 200 little lore drops. 20 for each faction that is specific to that faction and how they see the world, and also how they interpret the usefulness and meaning of echoes and the Synthos Rec as a whole. You guys were very clear. You wanted more art. we acquiesced. We made the art. So we posted on the Discord as well. Some people weighed in on the art samples that we gave for the echoes. What we decided on finally was that each echo is going to be materially different than each other faction. So every echo has the same basic construction, but it is constructed of different things. So for example, the Undercity echo is stone and metal, while the Cult echo is all cloth and ochre. So every one of them is built of something different to represent that faction's unique geography and heritage. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what is on those echoes, so you understand like what is being retained from echo to echo and how exactly these images were constructed. First off, the centerpiece of each echo is actually also on the back of the card. So if you've looked at the back of the card, you've noticed that there's that inset image. That's the seal of the Absinthos, found on the Absinthos wreck all over that thing. The seal of the Absinthos has always been on the back of the cards. Now it's also on the front of the echoes. So it's at the center of every echo is that particular faction's interpretation of the Absinthos seal. Some of them are more religious oriented, some of them are more specific or scientific, some of them are far more abstract, but they always have that logo, that seal at the centerpiece of their image. Outside of that, we have, depending on the faction, a less or more abstract map of the Milky Way galaxy. So it's the spiral arm that we're in. There's a sort of flattened galactic map that was originally carved into a piece of stone and is now being translated over to every faction's representation of what they think this thing is. And you may have seen this if you've been playing the game for many years. Every echo has always had some kind of representation of Milky Way spiral arm on it. And in addition, the stories are still coming. So you guys know every echo is going to have a different story on it. There are 200 little stories, so it is a massive lore drop. This is roughly the equivalent of the entire storybook being translated onto those echoes. It is that much stuff. It's really cool. I'm really excited for you to like dig in. It gives you something to do more than just look at your cards on your turn. If you're waiting for somebody else to take a turn, you can be like really investigating the like minutia of your faction just by reading your echoes if you want to. Finally, we got 2 more updates that you're really going to like. Number 1, there is a database coming from the user Alcyon. He is the famed creator of the Netrunner database, as well as several other game databases. So you will be able to have access, and you'll be able to look at cards in a way that you've never been able to look at them before. You'll be able to see all of the cards, check all the text. This is an excellent way where we can get our final feedback for every card in the game. Finally, all of our art contracts are now locked. So we finally have all of the artists locked in. We have almost all of the art locked in. Like 99% of the art is done. Outside of the echoes. You can check these out on the database as soon as it's up, and you'll be able to see all of the new art pieces on, I think, 80 different cards. So check it out. The game is progressing wonderfully. Feel free always to give us your feedback on our Discord. You can always email us or message us on Kickstarter, and we would love to hear any of your feedback on anything we've shown today. And remember, you can always find the latest information at fallofwormwood.com or on our Discord channel. That is also linked at fallofwormwood.com.